So, the political showdown of the century has come to pass.
Joe Biden.
Look, I'm very young, energetic, and handsome. What the hell am I doing this for?
Oh wait, no, sorry about that.
Kamala Harris.
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree.
Donald Trump.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
And in the post-election haze, we attempt to see through the bullshit. So, what happened? Well, we simply don't know. Why did Kamala lose? It's unclear. And how did Trump win? We may never know.
No one's saying that.
And are there any lessons for the Democrats to learn?
You know, I think that there's a lot of things to learn in this election, but I think overlearning some of them is a danger as well.
Okay, to analyze some of these questions, I want to draw attention to a certain podcast.
Pod Save America.
Get it? That's what they're doing. Their podcast is
Saving America.
Yeah, we were wild. Wild group this table.
A couple left-wing gorillas here.
Want proof? Well, right after the 2024 election, they invited a few guests on, to
Save America.
So first, let's get acquainted with a few people involved. People like
Hasan Piker.
the leftist Twitch streamer with a $2 million home. No, it's probably more like a $5 million, maybe even $15 million home, probably. Either way, socialists aren't allowed to own homes or make money. They're supposed to be poor. Everybody knows that.
He must be evil. Hasan Piker.
Guy who eats a lot of chicken. Guy who doesn't look anything like Mr. Beast.
Hasan Piker.
The scourge of all the most normal and level-headed people you know.
Hasan Piker, famed leftist Twitch streamer.
Hasan Piker, it turns out, has been revealed to be a very wealthy person.
He's funded by Gulf dictators, hundreds of millions. George Soros and Google. He wears jackets that say bash fascist.
Oh my God!
Pecker. Can't make up that name. That's his name, Hasan Picker. Oh, you're such a big man, Hasan. I bet he's got some big old giant bitch tits. I'm sorry, it's a family show. Just go ahead and roll this.
Hasan Piker.
Person who screams sometimes. Don't scream, Hasan. You're supposed to be a nice, quiet, little guy.
Kamala Harris.
The cackling, coconut-pilled neoliberal former prosecutor and attorney general of California.
Wheels on the bus go round and round. I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
Kamala Harris.
Vice president to one of the sharpest political masterminds we've seen in a century.
Joe Biden.
Yes, that Joe Biden.
God, can my dad drive a car? Oof.
The youthful whippersnapper Hayjack Titan of the Democratic Party.
Some people are always in a hurry. They run when they could walk. Race up steps when others take it slow. When Joe Biden's president, America is just going to have to keep up.
No. I said
Joe Biden.
The youthful whippersnapper Hayjack Titan of the Democratic Party.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if
Kamala Harris.
The once U.S. presidential hopeful with one of the most finger-on-the-pulse campaign management teams we've seen from the Democratic Party in at least the past 4 years.
Jen O'Malley Dillon.
Campaign manager for Biden's 2020 presidential campaign, former White House deputy chief of staff, campaign manager for Biden's 2024 re-election campaign.
And look, absolutely the president's in this race. You've heard him say that time and time again. He is clearly, in our impression and what we've built and in our engagement with voters, he's the best person to take on Donald Trump.
And the Kamala's 2024 presidential campaign, after that.
Hey everyone, I'm Jen O'Malley Dillon, back here with you to give you an update, this time on election night. We see that early vote is exactly as we'd like to see it. And our organization in every one of our battleground states is kicking ass.
Jen O'Malley Dillon.
Advisor to Gates Venture, General Electric, and Lyft.
David Plouffe, Plouffe.
Campaign manager for Barack Obama.
Hey everybody, it's David Plouffe, Barack Obama's campaign manager from 2008. As you probably heard, I have a new book out called The Audacity to Win. Now contrast that with our old friend Sarah Palin, who's out there, as you've probably heard, it'd be hard to miss this, with her own book, Going Rogue, which is selling predictably well. It's sold well over 1 million copies, and I'm sure it's going to continue to sell well. But we thought it might be fun little exercise on one day, Tuesday, December 8th, to see if we can use some of her old organizing techniques and spread the word, to see if we might be able to beat her for just one day.
Bipartisan podcast host with co-host and ex-campaign manager and senior consultant to Donald Trump, Kellyanne Conway.
Hi, it's Kellyanne Conway. Alternative facts.
And I'm David Plouffe. We have some exciting news. We're teaming up for a brand new podcast called The Campaign Managers.
David Plouffe.
The once senior vice president of policy and strategy for Uber,
Quentin Fulks.
Principal deputy campaign manager and campaign advertising lead of the
Biden
2024 presidential campaign.
The reporting is that your candidate, Joe Biden, has grown more receptive over the last few days, hearing this negative information and maybe dropping out, and that we could actually see him withdraw as early as this weekend. Where's the truth in that?
It's not true at all. Joe Biden has been very clear. He is running for president of the United States, and our campaign is continuing to implement a strategy to win with him at the top of the ticket.
We are coming on the air at this hour with breaking news. President Biden has just announced that he is ending his re-election bid.
Principal deputy campaign manager and campaign advertising lead of the
Kamala
2024 presidential campaign.
The demagoguing that's coming from Republicans know that this isn't about fixed prices. In fact, I think that there is reason to believe that Vice President Harris is going to work across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion. So Donald Trump and Republicans should stop playing games. Donald Trump and Republicans should stop playing games.
Stephanie Cutter.
Former advisor to Barack Obama. Deputy campaign manager for the 2012 Obama re-election campaign. Ranked 49th in the 50 most powerful people in D.C. in 2009 by Gentleman's Quarterly.
Stephanie Cutter.
Advisor to General Electric, Comcast, Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and Bank of America.
Stephanie Cutter.
Senior advisor of strategy messaging for the 2024 Kamala presidential campaign.
We are finishing strong. Turnout is up in almost every single state. There are projections, for instance, in Georgia, that we will exceed what our campaign had projected, but even what the Secretary of State had projected.
Former President Donald Trump, he wins the key state of Georgia.
We see incredibly high turnout on college campuses across Pennsylvania.
CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
So this coalition is coming together. Anecdotally, from what we see happening across the country, people are having a good time going to vote. There are DJs, there's dancing, there's that joy that the vice president talks about happening at polling places all over the country. So, but we are optimistic that we are literally about to be able to turn the page on Donald Trump and install Vice President Harris as the next president of the United States.
Donald Trump has been elected president, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? Joy. You exist in the context. Joy. Of all in which you live and what came before you. Joy. I find joy.
So, Pod Save America invited both the Kamala Harris campaign team on, as well as Hasan. 2 separate episodes with 2 separate vibes. The contrast between the Pod Save America episode with the Kamala campaign heads and the episode featuring Hasan was sort of like night and day. It was false liberal smiles and establishment excuses.
And again, I just want to, it can sound like making excuses. This political environment sucked, okay?
Versus cool-headed populism and straightforward simplifications.
And you can have the best ground game possible. You can have, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country door knocking. But if the top-down message that you're communicating is not resonating with people, then you're not going to be able to win an election. You're not going to have the effective turnout necessary to win this election. And that is precisely what happened.
I think these 2 episodes reveal a lot about what's wrong with the Democratic Party and what they could do, or more so what they refuse to do, to save their party. Now, in both of these episodes, there's a heavy focus on a few specific topics that were in discussion immediately after the election. One was whether or not the Democratic Party needed a Joe Rogan of the left. The campaign seems to like attributing Trump's victory to the fact that he did an independent podcast circuit. Joe Rogan, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn. So when people say the Dems need a Joe Rogan of the left, they mean a podcaster that could be the equivalent of what Joe Rogan has become to the right. No, sorry, I see what you did there, but that ain't it. Truthfully, there might not be an it, or even if there was a Joe Rogan of the left, that might not be what's needed to save the Democratic Party. Absolutely, the Democrats have a communication problem, which was another big topic of discussion in these episodes. But the Harris campaign seems to be focused on the idea that the Democrats needed something cool and cultural, something that isn't political to bring in voters.
We believed as we were closing the race that it was really important for people to feel like they were part of something bigger and that we were trying to identify opportunities to culturally reach people, not just politically reach people. That was a big part of our strategy. It's why in Philadelphia we spent, and in all of our urban markets, real resources on out of home. Yes, billboards, but also murals and other ways that people could walk down a street and they see something that's cultural and cool and something that connected with them, not in a political way, to reach people.
Yeah, that's probably it. A few nice big murals, a billboard or two here and there. That way everyone knows the Democrats have their backs and best interests in mind. The campaign seems to not realize that cool murals might not be the main reason the Democratic base didn't show up for them. They might not realize that it might be
material conditions.
For example, about this Joe Rogan of the left issue, a lot of people were discussing how Hasan could be that, and when asked about this, Hasan had this to say.
Ultimately, I think this goes beyond podcasts. This is something that I've been talking about quite frequently. I know the podcast thing is like the most, like that's the one that got everyone's attention, but you can't really podcast your way out of this problem.
I do agree that like people are like, oh, well, she should have gone on Rogan. All right, yeah, sure. I think so too.
That would not have changed the outcome of this election.
He then goes into one of the main reasons why the Democrats lost this election, and that is capitulating to right-wing framing.
Despite people like myself and many others saying like, don't do this, you're going to hemorrhage the base, you're going to hemorrhage the base of support, you are going to cut away at your turnout, you're going to cut across many different constituencies that you rely on to create an effective coalition, and it's a very dangerous gamble to assume that you can decouple a lot of these people in the suburbs, a lot of like white women specifically, away from the Republican Party and vote for you instead. I know that they're high propensity voters, but it doesn't matter. There's still plenty of low propensity voters that you have to rely on to win.
The problem is not that if only Kamala went on more cool and edgy podcasts that she would have won. This was not an issue of culture. This was an issue of material needs. The problem is that the Dem base was seeing Kamala and the party tacked to the right on a litany of issues, which we'll definitely be getting into soon enough. But for now, let's talk about the Harris campaign's focus on Kamala, the person, to see how this came to be.
And they saw in the vice president someone they didn't know a lot about a background. So, you know, who she was, what she stood for, what she did as vice president. So in every step of what we were trying to do, we had to tell a pretty robust story. We really focused from the get-go on how she was different than everyone else, different than Joe Biden, different than Donald Trump.
So we did talk about things like she's a different generation. Most of her career is from outside of Washington, not inside Washington. Her career has been about reaching across the aisle. All of these things, we were trying to tell a story and give the impression that she was different without pointing to a specific issue.
Well, we do all love a good story, don't we? Especially if it's
a pretty robust story.
So how did she separate herself from Biden? How did she show she would be different from him?
Listen, I plan on having a Republican in my cabinet.
I got a list.
Yes, right. You asked me what's the difference between Joe Biden and me. Well, that will be one of the differences. I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet.
Great. Anything else?
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Nice. So at a time when Joe Biden was so wildly unpopular that he had to step down as the Democratic nominee for president, at a time when his and her administration were allowing Israel to commit a genocide in Palestine, which, by the way, was not brought up by any of the campaign on Pod Save America, not even once, as if the genocide had no actual consequences on the election. Again, at a time when Biden was seen as weak, ineffective, and genocidal, the campaign chose to not distance herself from him. And why was that?
She also felt that she was part of the administration. And unless we said something like, well, I would have handled the border completely differently, we were never going to satisfy anybody.
Oh, Okay.
She felt like she was part of the administration, so why should she look back and cherry pick some things that she would have done differently when she was part of it?
Yeah, why would she look back and cherry pick things out of that she would have done differently? I don't know. Maybe she'd do that because she wanted to win, because that's what voters were looking for.
So we did talk about things like most of her career is from outside of Washington. Her career has been about reaching across the aisle.
All right, okay, let's get into it. One of the biggest mistakes this campaign made was, among many, like funding and refusing to end a genocide, was leaning into and capitulating to right-wing framing, such as campaigning with Liz Cheney, pro-lifer, Republican, and daughter of the genocidal architect of the Iraq War, Dick Cheney. Cheney, the name that instills anger and disgust in the hearts of Democrats all around the country. Yeah, that Dick Cheney. Yeah, well, his freak-ass weirdo daughter is awesome. And why is she awesome? Well, she thinks Orange Man bad. Listen, Orange Man is bad. Want to know who else is bad? The rest of the fucking Republicans. The whole lot of them. And while America's in the throes of rising fascism, maybe campaigning with the freak daughter of Dick fucking Cheney is a bad move, maybe.
There is something about a Democratic establishment figures that feel more comfortable with a Liz Cheney sitting at the table than with a leftist sitting at the table.
It's gross.
And that the disagreements with Liz Cheney are more kind of acceptable, and the disagreements to the left are less acceptable.
But one must ask the question, why is that acceptable? Liz Cheney is anti-LGBT. Liz Cheney is anti-abortion. Liz Cheney is anti-Democratic Party. Liz Cheney is the daughter of a rabid, warmongering, terrorist sociopath, Dick Cheney. And yet there are Democrats who are more comfortable with her than people who also would totally be on board with the Democratic Party.
Hasan goes on to explain the blatant problem with the Democrats doing this.
I think there is a lot of hypocrisy there, and and hypocrisy that people can see. Hypocrisy is the easiest thing that they can understand. You can't say that these guys are fascists, these guys are racist for 8 years for wanting to build a wall and then turn around and straight up tell Anderson Cooper in that town hall, well, maybe the wall is a good idea and I want to build it myself. I'm going to be the border czar. I'm going to be the border party. You can't do that. Americans look at that and go, so you're admitting that you were just lying for the past 8 years. I want them to be a party that actually fights for the working class, for all Americans unconditionally, regardless of ideology. And you can't do that through bipartisanship with an otherwise hostile entity that is the Republican Party.
You describe it as hypocrisy. It's compromise. Politics requires compromise.
Yeah, politics is all about compromise, right? We compromise with the Republicans, just like how they compromise with us, and then
the Republican Party rarely ever compromises. They're uncompromising. You only have to beat them.
But that's not true, though, right? I agree with that on Trump, but that's just not true. They did compromise, right? There are plenty of people on the Republican side that were furious at Republican senators for going along with some of these Biden bills, right? Those are people that did compromise.
Yeah, there is a million examples, however, of Republicans that are obstructionists that I'm sure you also love presenting, that go back to their town halls and lie about all the money that they brought back home from the bills that they voted against. So ultimately, we now know that political polarization is set in a way that never really existed in American history until the last couple of decades, right? I think that parties originally were more geopolitically focused on their immediate needs, like statewide needs. So you saw this dramatic shift, and now the Republican Party, especially with Mitch McConnell, under the Obama administration, showcased that permanent obstructionism is not punishable. And that gridlock is always considered the administrative party's problem.
It's clear the Harris campaign had an absolute obsession with trying to flip Republican voters to make them vote Democrat. Of course, in hindsight, we know this effectively did absolutely nothing. And a lot of us on the left were saying as much before we even had the results. It was clear. It was obvious.
And when your opponent is trying to make you more extreme and to make you dangerously liberal, the ways you can push back on that is by having people stand with you that don't agree with you on everything.
No, the truth is, if there are people out there who are already under the assumption that
Kamala is dangerously liberal, she should be more conservative like me,
you're very unlikely to win them over. Let them think that. Face it, they're not on your side. Let them vote their way. And to combat that, activate your base. Activate the left, the young people, activate progressives. Run a real progressive platform, not an increasingly conservative one like they did. Because just like how those conservatives think,
Kamala is dangerously liberal.
when you court conservatives and parrot conservative talking points, progressives will think,
Kamala is too conservative.
which would cancel out any conservative voters you may have flipped. There's a very real chance that for every conservative vote you gain, you lose a progressive, or even more. And in the end, what we saw was even worse. We saw essentially no conservative voters flipped, but a massive number of Democrat votes lost because they just didn't show up. In all honesty, when I hear conservatives say they trust Kamala, I get suspicious, and I know I'm not the only one. When I hear this,
as Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
I get suspicious. When I hear Kamala respond with this when she's asked if she believes trans people deserve the medical care they need at a time when trans people have been in the direct crosshairs of conservatives.
On the question of your beliefs, what you believe in, let me ask you this question very broadly speaking here.
Sure.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though. Just broadly speaking, what is your value? Do you believe they should have that access?
I believe that people, as the law states.
I get suspicious when I hear Kamala say this about the border.
Let's talk about this compromise bill that you want to pass if you're elected. You said that's going to be a priority. It includes $650 million in funding for the border wall. That's something Republicans wanted. That was part of the compromise. Under Donald Trump, you criticized the wall more than 50 times. You called it stupid, useless, and a medieval vanity project. Is a border wall stupid?
Well, let's talk about Donald Trump and that border wall. So remember Donald Trump said Mexico would pay for it? Come on, they didn't. How much of that wall did he build? I think the last time I saw about 2%, and then when it came time for him to do a photo op, you know where he did it? In the part of the wall that President Obama built.
But you're agreeing to a bill that would earmark $650 million to continue building that wall.
I pledge that I am going to bring forward that bipartisan bill to further strengthen and secure our border. Yes, I am. Because we need a president who is grounded in common sense and practical outcomes. Like, let's just fix this thing. Let's just fix it. Why is there any ideological perspective on it? Let's just fix the problem.
To fix the problem, you're doing this compromise bill. It does call for $650 million that was earmarked under Trump to actually still go to build the wall.
I am not afraid of good ideas where they occur.
So you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I get suspicious, and I know I'm not the only one. The entire 2024 election on behalf of the Democrats was about pivoting to the right. They were trying to assure conservatives that she was not too dangerously liberal. Shit, they even removed abolishing the death penalty from their party platform. That's like, Jesus Christ. And since the Democratic Party's politics were clearly and rapidly pivoting to the right, they had to focus on Kamala, the person, instead of focusing on Kamala, the policies, because the policies weren't there. And if they were conservative ones. In hindsight, the campaign likes to present this election as something that would be impossible to win.
But the headwinds were tough.
This political environment sucked, okay? We were dealing with ferocious headwinds.
Yeah, the political environment sucked because they ran an increasingly conservative platform in Kamala against an incredibly conservative platform in Trump.
It was Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, and we had to set that choice and that frame up.
Wow, a race is between two candidates. Imagine that. Thanks for setting the scene for us.
We were dealing with ferocious headwinds, and I think people's instinct was to give the Republicans and even Donald Trump another chance. So we had a complicated puzzle to put together here in terms of the voters.
So why did she lean into right-wing framing and try taking Trump on his own turf? It was a recipe for disaster. If you're trying to get the votes of conservatives and you say, well, one candidate has been tough on the border since the beginning, and then you say, and this other candidate has been tough on the border since 6 minutes ago, who will the conservative likely vote for? Or if you said, well, one candidate is extremely conservative, and then you say, and the other candidate has a few conservatives who kinda like them, who do you think the conservative will vote for? Probably the more conservative one. Yeah.
Headwinds.
Headwinds were headwinds.
Resorting to some story about ferocious headwinds makes it seem as if the Democrats didn't stand a chance, that it was all in the cards. Fate was that they would lose. This is an outright lie. It was their strategy that lost. Their policies. Plain and simple. This compounds with the fact that all around the country, progressive candidates are increasingly winning at the local level and on down-ballot races, something which the campaign seems to think would translate to the presidential level in Kamala's campaign for some reason.
There's a number of states that will be on the board, including in 26 that are Senate races, that will be very hard to win without getting some of those voters that we were talking to.
And I think
those
that
Republican-leaning
voters. I mean, and if you look at it, and again, this probably sounds, I hope it doesn't sound offensive to the people listening.
Because it's really not, but
if you look at 22 and you look at 20, that's how Democrats won these races. And I mean, 9% of Republican voters voted for Raphael Warnock in Georgia in 2022.
The problem with contrasting Kamala's campaign with the smaller local races won by Democrats in 2020 and 2022 is that during those races, there was a groundswell of support for progressive candidates, even socialist candidates. They did not run on the same platform which Kamala ran on in the 2024 presidential election. Contrasting those smaller races with Kamala's presidential race kind of just proves the point that voters want progressive candidates, something Kamala only feigned to be, but with nothing to back it up. Again, if she ran a campaign similar to theirs, it's very likely she would have won, but she didn't.
Look, if you can turn out more of your base voters, that is good, but especially as we head into a midterm, and we also saw these voters beginning that trend of coming to Democrats in 2020 from the Biden race was the first time they did it. In 2022, we said, can we hold these voters? We ran strategies to try to do that. We were successful at doing it.
Again, contrasting the 2022 midterm strategies, which were won by many progressive candidates, against Kamala's campaign, which was essentially center-right or simply just right, doesn't work. It worked in 2022 because of progressive candidates. It didn't work in 2024 because Kamala was not a progressive candidate. Also, the 2020 election was a very interesting case. Trump was in the Oval Office. We were suffering from the COVID pandemic. Voters actually saw that Biden was saying he was going to be a progressive candidate because he ran that way, even if much of it turned out to be lies which he would never end up tackling. They didn't do that with Kamala. They ran her as a centrist for small businesses and conservatives. They didn't even bother lying about her policies. They were honest about her policies. It just so happened to be that those policies were increasingly conservative ones. And come to think of it, it worked for Biden in 2020 and Dems in the 2022 midterms without Dems even courting conservatives the way they did in 2024. Those conservatives that decided to flip Democrat back then just made that decision on their own, it seems. The campaign seemed to think that since they got a few conservative voters to flip, that they should just abandon their base and anyone to the left of center. And they did exactly that. They brought out all Trump's ex-friends to tell us how horrible he was.
And you could either have a Democrat trying to give that message, or you can have generals and people who worked for Trump delivering that message.
And your net data said those probably had more credibility to do that than a Democrat?
100%.
Yeah, why would you want a Democrat telling you that Hitler is bad, when instead you could have Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Goebbels tell us how horrible Hitler is? They're pretty trustworthy dudes, yeah? Even better, have Himmler and Goebbels stand next to the Democrat and say how good friends they are, and that they endorse that Democrat. Great, we are not nervous about anything. Do not send help. And with all the hand-wringing about the Democrats losing the media culture war to conservatives, the truth is Trump was an eminently beatable candidate. The Democrats lost because they were courting conservatives instead of bolstering the left. And that second loss to Trump will be the Democrats' shining crowning achievement of the neoliberal hell they forced us to live in. If Kamala had run a true progressive platform, one of universal health care, ending the genocide in Gaza, forgiving student loans, tackling homelessness in meaningful ways, making sure the broken immigration system is fixed so immigrants aren't waiting years upon years to become citizens, end gerrymandering, and presenting a platform that would actually help the working class by taking on the corporations who make people's lives miserable, she would have won.
People were still very frustrated with what was going on. The notion that in the wealthiest nation on earth, we have 600,000 people sleeping outside every night. The idea that, we have the concept of medical bankruptcy is an insane phenomenon that doesn't exist in any other OECD nation. 60% of the American public doesn't have $400 in emergency spending. These are all very real economic anxiety that creates volatility, that creates instability, and it creates a base of angry people. And if the Democratic Party is not addressing that anger and addressing their material problems and earnestly telling them, like, we're gonna fix that shit, okay? And the other side is looking at that anger and saying, we're going to channel your anger. You have every right to be angry. And you know who you should be angry at? Those who have less than you. You know who you should be angry at? The working poor, the homeless people that are doing crimes left and right, black and brown people, undocumented migrants that are doing incredible amounts of crimes. They're killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, and trans people. And the Democratic Party only cares about those people and they don't care about you. And that message resonates with a base of support, not because they are intrinsically evil. That message resonates with a base of support because they're angry, and one of the two major parties is not even remotely interested in addressing that anger and trying to tell them what the solution to that anger actually is. and what the real problem is.
The fact of the matter is that Kamala didn't run a progressive campaign. Instead, she capitulated to right-wing framing and lost. And with that, she lost the Democratic base, making it increasingly clear that the electorate is rejecting liberalism. The current main and biggest problem the Democratic Party has is that they are wedded to the institutions of capital. They refuse to evolve due to their corporate interests. Not only refusing, but they're unable to. Capital has claimed them, pulled them into its inescapable quagmire of the need to accumulate capital to serve your major corporate donors. They are not a party of the people. They are a party of the corporations, of the wealthy, just as the Republicans are. Many people are beginning to see that these two parties are one beast. They're neoliberals, and neoliberals don't care about you. All they care about is soaking up every last resource so they can outlive you in their wealth as the world burns and crumbles around the people they harm. This brings me to my next point. The Democrats clearly don't care about what their base wants or what they believe. They only care about how they can control and manipulate that base into voting for them. After the October 7th attack by Hamas on the Nova Festival, Israel immediately began an ethnic cleansing campaign with their genocide in Gaza. Many people were begging the Biden administration, and soon the Kamala campaign, to stop the genocide. The uncommitted movement had over 500,000 voters writing in uncommitted during the primaries, and with many more advocating for the Democrats to stop the genocide. They understood that Israel was under control of the United States, who offers it the majority of the financial aid and weapons for committing said genocide. Israel is nothing without the United States' support. Yet, the people were seeing Biden get dog-walked by Netanyahu and Israel. It made the Biden administration look incredibly weak, letting such a small nation call the shots and have the United States fall in line behind them. Clear lines were being drawn. Many voters were being open that they would not vote for Biden if he continued the genocide. Yet many diehard liberal blue waivers and resistance libs suggest that those voters threatening to withhold their vote should be voting for Biden unconditionally due to the threat of a second Trump presidency. Many were saying some form of, you need to unconditionally vote for the Democrats because you're voting to save democracy. And, well, I'm not sure if they know this, but the basis of democracy is literally about extracting concessions from politicians in exchange for your vote. That's the name of the game. It's a fucking cornerstone. When they tell you you need to unconditionally vote for the Democrats because we're voting to save democracy, well, what they're telling you to do is anti-democratic. More so, it resembles the mindset of conservatives, blind faith voting. No matter how cruel or depraved, you must vote for the party. Okay, let's break it down. See, a politician offers concessions to you in exchange for your vote. You do not vote first without being offered concessions with unknown hopes they will maybe hopefully give you concessions after they are voted in, even though they have not offered you or promised you anything concretely. It always seems hard for liberals to wrap their mind around this. When a candidate says, I would like your vote, you don't just say, okay. You say, all right, well, I have some demands. What will you offer me? How can you make my life better? Make other people's lives better? And if that politician says, excuse me, how about you just fucking vote for me, okay?
Okay.
That's a bit of a red flag. So they say, well, this is to save democracy. Trump is coming back. We're your only option to defeat him. So some voters say, all right, I'll vote for you. If you say, stop the genocide, you're guilty of aiding and abetting. And that politician says, yeah, don't worry. We're going to get to that. We're working on it. Just vote for us.
Okay.
The problem is, people know that particular politician also happens to be in power right now. People know they can stop the genocide. They know they can do more than what they're doing. They're seeing innocent civilians slaughtered in the tens of thousands, yet the politician in power doesn't stop. Instead, they just continue to scream, but Trump is bad, Trump is bad, Trump is bad. Yes, we know Trump. We know he's a psycho. What we're asking is that you prove that you are not a psycho. Yet the genocide continues. Yet they pivot to the right. And they continue to not understand what their voting base is not just asking, but demanding. And that is, you are not listening to us. You do not care about us. We will not support you if you do not put your money where your mouth is. And again, the genocide continues. And again, they pivot to the right. Many liberals tried writing this feeling of despair on behalf of those against the genocide off as a single-issue voter problem, which to me is strikingly sad, and a big old red flag for liberalism in general. People were desperately begging their government to stop the killing of innocent civilians of all ages, yet many liberals were essentially saying, defeating Trump is more important than the Democrats proving they have the moral clarity to end a genocide. And listen, if killing innocent children isn't an important enough issue for you, okay, wow, great, amazing, you scare the shit out of me. But maybe if it was your kid or someone you loved who was getting slaughtered for no reason, Would you suddenly care about that issue, I wonder? Would it be your most important issue? If it was people you loved who were getting ethnically cleansed and their homes and schools destroyed, would you feel any different? Would you not try to hold officials accountable and ask for concessions to stop the needless suffering? Or would you just say, well, politics isn't that easy, just vote for them now and maybe they'll help later? I wonder if they'd push back then. Some form of this why oh why does the left push back on Democrats but the right doesn't push back on Republicans complaint was brought up in both Pod Save America episodes by the hosts as well as the campaign itself. So let's go through a few of those instances.
Trump does not apologize. If he says something, he means it, and his party stands behind him, and they don't make him backtrack it.
Like the online right is, I think it's bigger and more influential, but it also knows how to get on board. Right? Like it knows, like it fights, it has disagreements, it pushes, but then it knows like for our ends, for our goals, we all need to get behind, whether it's Trump or in previous elections, it was getting behind like Romney-like figures, McCain-like they get behind those figures. And sometimes it feels like on the left, there's no moment at which we say, all right, we've had the fight, we've had the debate, we disagree on a whole bunch of stuff. Hey, everybody, we're going to get together. We're going to make sure that we stop Donald Trump. We elect Joe Biden as much as we elect Kamala Harris. Like that moment doesn't come.
Here's the thing. This sort of thinking by liberals is the same reason liberals often don't understand why the left will give Dems shit, but the right won't give Republicans shit. To not understand this is to not know the basic ideological difference between the left and right political spectrums. The right will almost always mindlessly fall in line behind who they're told to fall in line behind. On the flip side, the left will not mindlessly fall in line behind who they're told to fall in line behind. And why is that? The left has a principle of never mindlessly falling in line if other principles are being sacrificed. And the further left you go, the more those principles matter. The further left you go, the more many of those principles can become sacrosanct. For example, if you're a leftist who says you're against genocide, you should never endorse someone who's committing genocide. You have to actively speak up against them. To a leftist, that's obvious. You cannot just tell a leftist to do something, especially if they're told to do something that doesn't align with their principles. That core understanding is apparently not so clear to some liberals.
And that's why I brought forward the point that like you can have 1.5 billion, right? Mm-hmm. You can have ground game. None of that matters if the message is not actually addressing the real issues that Americans are facing. And the reason why I think the Republicans can go out and vote for the Republican Party and don't usually sit it out, I guess, and instead are able to say, suck it up and say, yeah, we're still going to vote for Donald Trump, is because there are single issue voters out there, and Trump, they know that Trump is going to protect it. People that like guns are going to be like, I like my guns. I want my guns to be protected. I want to be able to marry my gun. I want to be able to have sex with my gun. Mm-hmm. I know Donald Trump is going to be the guy that lets that happen. And I know the Democrats are going to, shun me for wanting to have sex with my gun. So that guy's going to go and vote for Trump regardless, right? On the other side, though, if your top line communication and your major policy prescriptions are like, we have to preserve these institutions, we have to preserve civility, and we have to preserve democracy at a time when Americans are like, I don't give a fuck about democracy, just lower the price of eggs, then there's no way that I could outflank the Democratic Party and get people to vote for Kamala Harris in a way that sticks, in a way that is going to be successful, no matter how much influence I wield.
It's true. The reason the right will often fall in line behind who they're told to fall in line behind is because their party is offering them what they want. Protecting gun rights, anti-immigration policies, tough on crime policies, anti-DEI policies. These are all the sort of principles a conservative wants and is being offered by their party. And the big issue with the Democratic Party right now is that they are not offering their supporters what they want. Actually, they're increasingly offering their supporters what the conservatives in the other party want, and they're doing it loudly. And the result of this is their supporters no longer showing up to support them. No content creator, no live streamer or podcaster can help the Democratic Party in that regard. That's a core failing of their institution and their policies, something in the hands of the party to fix. The responsibility shouldn't have to rest on the shoulders of some guy who dresses like this. Of course, the Kamala campaign seems to not understand that it's not just media and culture that lost them the election, that it's actually their policies and communication.
She did more traditional media than Trump did, as you point out, did basically none. Like
Trump did
literally none.
Thank God no shit for that.
Get shit from the interested party, the media that wasn't getting their interview. But voters don't give a shit.
Wait, Trump got shit for that? That's what I'm saying. We got shit. I'm saying Trump got no
yes.
shit.
We got tons of shit that she wasn't doing enough media.
Yeah. He got no shit.
Don't even get me going on that.
Complaining about a double standard when talking about Trump in the media is fucking hilarious and awesome, especially after he just won the presidency by not doing traditional media and doing more independent media like podcasts instead.
Got no shit.
Get shit, don't give a shit.
Trump got shit? We got shit.
We got tons of shit.
He got no shit.
Wow, no shit. Now, just mere moments before this clip, they said this.
We did lots of outreach to many of the same podcasts that he went on. Ultimately, as we said with everything in this campaign, we had to pick and choose because of the limitations on time. But I do also want to say that Tim Walz was a huge podcaster and was on podcasts all the time. In the politics adjacent space that you were talking about, sports, hunting, fishing, running, football generally.
Again, they were focusing too much on the cultural aspects of the campaign. Oh, just so you know, Tim Walz is just like you, everyone. He likes sports, hunting, fishing, running.
Football generally.
Yeah, generally. But what they needed in this election was not only to show that their candidate was someone who you could get a beer with or chat about the big game with. They needed someone who could come out and effectively communicate how they were going to make their constituents' lives materially better. For example, at a time when anti-immigration sentiment is fomenting due to the conservatives' ever-pursuing racist anti-immigration campaign. At a time when immigrants are being deported in record numbers by your administration. And at a time where vicious lies are being spread about immigrants eating cats and dogs, or lies about immigrants trafficking drugs. What would you do? In hindsight, we know how the Kamala campaign decided to tackle it.
Under Donald Trump, you criticized the wall more than 50 times. You called it stupid. You don't think it's stupid anymore.
As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking.
But was there another way of dealing with this issue?
The Republicans are going to keep hitting the immigrants are doing crime note over and over again because that's the one thing that they have. And it's built around a complete falsehood that undocumented migrants are responsible for incredible amounts of crime. It's not correct. There is no data to suggest this. The data actually shows the exact opposite. Undocumented migrants are your neighbors. They contribute to the economy in very meaningful ways, and they very rarely take anything in return. Why is the Democratic Party not pushing this counter narrative? And they never did. Instead of pushing that counter narrative, which is based in truth, and talk about how undocumented migrants are responsible for less crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are, or that fentanyl being trafficked across the U.S. borders are actually not coming in the knapsack of a otherwise law-abiding abuela, but instead it's coming from regular points of entry trafficked by American citizens. 90% of the people that are being apprehended for chemical compounds necessary for fentanyl or direct drugs that they're trafficking across the border are American citizens. This does not track with the narrative that people believe, because the narrative is dominated by the right on this issue. They should have been counter-messaging against that.
Sure. Okay. You could have said that, yeah. But how's that supposed to convince our precious conservatives we're trying to flip to vote for us? Or as another example, at a time when trans, queer, and LGBTQ people around the country are directly in the crosshairs of the people who you've been calling fascist for the past 8 years, at a time where you've spent years shouting to the world about how you're an ally, how you're going to protect them, how you hear them, you see them, how would you respond?
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law.
With that, it's simple to understand what she meant. She refused to say she believes trans people deserve the medical care they need as long as the law says they don't deserve it. That's it. That's what she said. She made no other attempt to defend trans people. This is where she let it lie.
Hypocrisy that people can see. Hypocrisy is the easiest thing that they can understand.
But I suppose there was no other way to communicate to people that trans people aren't a threat, right? To show that they're people just like you. just like me.
These people do not exist in a vacuum. They're not magical, mystical beings that are not experiencing the shocks of the market, or they still have to pay rent. They still need workplace protections. They still need the cost of medicine to go down, right? But it's not a trans person that's your landlord that's raising the cost of rent.
So yeah, trans and queer voters got pissed at Kamala. Throughout this campaign, a lot of voters got pissed off at the campaign.
Republicans don't make Trump apologize. There are a lot of times where if you're in the Democratic Party and you step out of line, you get punished for it. Trump does not apologize. If he says something, he means it, and his party stands behind him, and they don't make him backtrack it.
Yeah, that's called unending fealty. Something many liberals wanted from those uncommitted voters who said they would not vote for Biden or Harris if they were committing genocide. As in, they were pushing back and demanding concessions for their vote, a good thing. What democracy is all about. However, liberal Dems were frustrated over this. They wanted people to fall in line behind Kamala 100%, the same way the GOP demands their voters fall in line behind Trump 100%. The cognitive dissonance here is truly stunning and incredibly concerning.
We put out an ad with a cuss word in it, and the amount of feedback that we got was insane.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that is not a leftist problem. Yeah, this would be a liberal problem. I think if it's anyone getting upset at that, it's liberals who are upset. I'm pretty confident most leftists do not give one shit if you cuss in an ad. The people you're complaining about is yourself. The kind of thing the left gets really angry about is, like, I don't know, committing genocide. Also, if decorum matters so much, why was that short-lived They're Weird campaign so popular and effective?
These guys are just weird. That's who they are. So it isn't much else. Well, it's true. These guys are just weird.
For that very brief moment after Biden dropped out and Kamala was announced with Tim Walz, the campaign suddenly had a burst of energy. They were calling conservatives weird. They were calling fascists creepy.
Your genitals are reserved for procreation.
If you freeze 12 eggs, you should be required to have 12 babies, or else you're a serial killer. And I'm definitely not a serial killer. Are you?
And people were eating that shit up. I was genuinely shocked that the Democratic Party, for once, struck a very particular chord they do not usually strike. And that is, I don't even know. They were vibing, I guess. Almost as if it was taken out of the leftist shitposter playbook or something. And it was breaking conservatives' brains.
On my show today, I talked a little bit about the sort of weird slur and the fact that they're using this. Again, to me, this is all projection. They have trans influencers jiggling their fake breasts on the lawn of the White House.
The hogs were going wild. It was kind of amazing. Right-wing weirdos truly didn't understand the dichotomy between good weird and bad weird, because they only live and breathe bad weird. Only good weird truly understands good weird. And so what did the Democrats do? You know them. They got their fingers on the pulse. So they immediately said, "Don't do that. That's mean. Rest in peace. They're weird. We hardly knew you." This is a general problem with liberals in the Democratic Party. Their distorted sense of decorum halts them from progressing. Their weird was a revelation, and the truth. Conservatives are weird. They are creepy. They want to control your body. They're obsessed with kids' genitals. They want you to stay poor. They want you to suffer so they can live more comfortably. That's weird. They're weird. But the Kamala campaign had a great idea. How about we don't make fun of the conservatives? How about we try to get them to join us instead? Campaign with them, for God's sakes. Whatever you do, do not make fun of the fascists, please. So why doesn't the Democratic Party try to progress? Why don't they tap into leftist content creators like Hasan? What do they really mean when they say they need a Joe Rogan of the left? When the Democrats say they need a Joe Rogan of the left, they don't mean they want someone like Hasan to be speaking on their behalf about the importance of the left. No, when the Democrats say they need a Joe Rogan of the left, they mean they need someone with as large of an audience as Joe Rogan or Hasan who will parrot centrists and center-right DNC talking points, fall into line blindly and willingly for liberal politics. They want a useful and popular propagandist. But the problem with a liberal version of this is that liberalism is losing steam.
Kamala Harris did 3 events one day with Liz Cheney, and we're still hearing about how it was that's what caused the end of the election.
But I actually, honestly... Its ineffective and flaccid nature renders it useless against the rising tide of contemporary postmodern fascism, which is every step of the way proving that its reactionary way of manipulating people is more effective than the "when they go low, we go high," all for show civility of liberalism. The same reason young folks aren't exactly flocking to Pod Save America is the same reason they are flocking to someone like Hasan.
Let's continue.
I am here at Target in Tampa, Florida. Just walked in the door.
Dude, you are such a sweaty loser, dog. That's crazy to me. You went to a Target to look at the rainbow stuff and if it's still there or not.
Right here at the very front.
Oh! Oh!
There you go.
What?
Little toddler mannequin, and it gets better. Check this out.
It gets better? No.
Hasan is approachable.
We pooped and we peed.
He comes off as a regular person.
Now let's see what goodies await me in here. Ooh, a cake globe. Wait, cake pop. It appears to be a perfect sphere. Nice. It kind of looks like a turd.
He's not trying too hard to win you over. That simply doesn't apply to the likes of Pod Save America, a podcast literally started by and operated by former Obama staffers and speechwriters.
A couple left-wing gorillas right here.
Now, Hasan has a large audience. He's easily the top leftist streamer, with an average of approximately 29,000 daily viewers, with his peak audience being over 300,000 during the 2024 election. For anyone who's a leftist, you'll know this is a large number. In a world literally dominated by pro-capitalism, pro-neoliberalism, and anti-socialism sentiment, leftist politics has always been an uphill battle, especially in the United States. Whereas there's millions and millions of dollars funneled easily into both conservative and liberal causes, the same doesn't apply to leftist politics. It's the same reason you'll see public figures quickly pivot to conservatism after they find themselves in hot water.
New footage appears to show that January the 6th was not an attempted insurrection. Is it time to disband the FBI, or would that amount to shutting down a key wing of the Democrat Party?
If you care about democracy, if you care about freedom, I don't know how you can do anything other than vote for Donald Trump.
There's easy money in the right-wing grift economy. There's not so much money in the left-wing grift economy. But the further right you go, the easier it is to grift. I mean, the MAGA Trump dropshipping industrial complex kind of says everything, doesn't it? You'll find whole store spaces in many red states and towns that are wholly dedicated to Trump memorabilia.
So then he opened a small kiosk in a nearby mall and was required to stock both merch of the donkey and elephant variety.
And the Democratic merchandise was about 1/2 of 1% of my sales.
So he moved into this location at the Ben Salem Plaza off of Street Road, and now is focused only on Trump swag.
Just like a rock band that sells all kinds of merchandise everybody wants, it's the same thing.
You won't exactly find, like, a Bernie Sanders memorabilia store scattered throughout blue states, will you? The political grift economy is absolutely dominated by right-wing politics. What I'm trying to say is the fact that Hasan, or even other leftist content creators, have been able to carve out such a large and dedicated audience is a positive sign for the left. It means leftist politics are gaining ground and becoming more easily digestible, more sought after. And the Democrats know this, and their nerves show it. If you saw how Hasan was invited to the Democratic National Convention in 2024, it's very clear the Democratic Party was testing him to see if he would play ball, to see if he could, to some degree, be controlled.
What world are we living in?
After all, there's so many content creators who, once they get a taste of that DNC boost and support, quickly fall in line with the liberal agenda. So they invited him to the DNC. Why not? Maybe he'll fall in line too, and they can soak up that ever-growing audience of his. Well, it also became very clear that he wasn't going to play ball the way they wanted him to. So, as per usual, he was speaking out about the genocide in Gaza, but this time with the Democratic National Convention stage right behind him.
After all of the commitment that the Democratic Party has given to the Israeli government to just basically absolutely eviscerate entire Palestinian families with American-made bombs, that they can't even fucking have a Palestinian person, an individual with family members come and speak in this similar fashion is disgusting to me.
Calling the Democratic Party genocide heirs directly to their face, under their own roof, pointing out the party's very obvious faults and shortcomings, his position changed in no way from before he was invited, and that clearly wasn't going to work for them. So they kindly and quickly removed him from the convention grounds.
We're getting booted. We're getting booted. Like we're permanently done here? Bro, that's so whack.
And for the DNC, that was that. In the aftermath of the election, it really seems the Democratic Party is now the never-Trump Republican Party.
As a Cold War kid, I'm thankful it was Reagan and not Trump in office in the 1980s. Trump would have lost us the Cold War. But I stand with the majority of Americans who believe we are still exceptional.
Unparalleled. And we'll see them continue to pivot to neocon positions as they've done during the entire election. Are they unable to learn anything of material consequence? The moral failing of the Democrats is this. Their blatant, disgusting capitulation to right-wing framing. It was never gonna work. And if they'd listened to their base, they would have known this. But the Democrats are now just the never-Trump Republicans. And real leftists are likely their enemies now more than ever. There are no more Republicans or Democrats. We now only have Trump Republicans and never Trump Republicans. Both parties completely reshaped into parties which play on Trump's ever-shifting fascist grounds. On his court, Dems now meet him at his fascism rather than counter it. The same reason the tech billionaires are blatantly pivoting to the right in the aftermath of the second Trump presidency is exactly the same reason why the Democrats have been pivoting to the right as well. They're all neoliberals. And conservative politics benefit neoliberals more than left politics. They prefer them because they keep regular people as far away from the reins of control as possible. Donald Trump is busy tapping into every right-wing demographic with ease. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party would put a gun in their mouth and blow their brains out for even thinking about asking, like, a communist for their vote. It's easy to see which side will win it all in the end if the Democratic Party doesn't change, if they don't truly evolve, or if another party, a workers' party, doesn't rise in their place. But the whole endeavor of the American political machine since the early 1900s has at its core been to uproot and eradicate communism and socialism so as to serve the whims of capital.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist.
That's it. That's the machine. Communism is the enemy of capital, and capital is the core of neoliberalism. And it seems that within that sphere of neoliberalism, between liberalism and conservatism, conservatism is unfortunately outsmarting liberalism. How much longer can liberalism hold out until it's too late? Remember, after 4 years of a Trump presidency, and then 4 years of a Biden presidency, Trump's personal favorability levels during the 2024 election were still higher than his were in 2016. This was not because he's a savvy politician, but because his opponents are less savvy than him, and they can't, or won't, counter him properly. But it's becoming apparent that the Democrats, and many staunch liberals in general, don't care about what the Democratic base wants. If they did, you wouldn't have just seen rhetoric about trying to end the genocide in Gaza.
With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done.
You would have first seen Joe Biden make the call to Netanyahu to end the genocide. The ball was in Biden's court.
No administration has helped Israel more than I have. None. None. None.
He was supplying the funds, the weapons, the cover for the genocide. If he wanted to end it, he would have ended it. Instead, what we got from both him and Kamala were more Zionist talking points. A steady flow of
the president and I are working around the clock
lip service statements regarding helping Palestinians. They were saying this as mass amounts of voters begged for them to end the genocide, many of whom had families and had lost family members in the genocide.
We've lost friends, we've lost neighbors, people that we grew up with and we lived with, even though we're not living currently with them. But at the end of the day, any innocent life or any life is lost, is a loss for humanity.
But all we got was...
let me be very clear. I am unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But
we're working round the clock.
We knew this was bullshit, so they continued to beat the
Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop.
Drum, while more and more citizens saw footage of blown up babies, dead children, buildings, schools, mosques, and hospitals bombed, and blatant lies from the Israeli government and our own. They saw the International Criminal Court declare Netanyahu a war criminal and calling for his arrest over what Israel was doing. People were learning about the Israel-Palestine conflict and about the apartheid occupation. It was apparent, easy to see, the Democratic Party was showing not only that they didn't care about it, but they were actively supporting it. In hindsight, we now know, as many of us already did, that this had a huge impact on voters. 29% of Biden voters from 2020 who didn't vote for Kamala in 2024 stated the genocide in Gaza as their biggest reason. We also know now that even if every vote in every swing state, which was cast for Jill Stein, Cornel West, and Claudia de la Cruz, was given to Kamala instead, she still would not have enough votes to beat Trump. So people can harp on how Green Party voters ruined this election for Kamala all you want. It wouldn't have changed anything. And this is not inconsequential. This is the first time the Democrats lost a popular vote in over 20 years, and understanding how the Democrats failed here is crucial. Remember, during the campaign in Michigan, the state where the most Palestinian Arabs reside, many with family members in Palestine. The Kamala campaign went so far as to send Richie Torres to speak at a rally. Yes, Richie Torres. Rabid Zionist, AIPAC and Israel-funded Richie Torres. And while he was there, he proudly told the crowd that Kamala had rejected calls from the uncommitted movement in regards to having a Palestinian-American speaker at the DNC, because she didn't want to risk the chance of a speaker opposing Israel. He also openly admitted that the warning letter the Biden-Harris administration sent to Israel about possibly losing military aid was nothing more than a political gesture and wasn't an actual policy change for the administration. And they didn't stop there. After that, they sent Bill Clinton to Michigan, where he told the crowd this.
Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis and make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before there was, their faith existed. They were there. But Kamala Harris has said that she will try to negotiate an end to the violence, an end to the killing, and a new peace process. And that ought to be enough. That ought to be enough. That ought to be enough. That ought to be enough.
This was nothing short of a slap in the face to Arab voters. More like spitting in their face, if anything. The thing is this, the genocide in Gaza shows us where the intersections of all justice meet. During the campus protest for Palestine in 2024, we saw the United States under a Democratic presidency uproot those protests, smear them as anti-Semitic. We saw police beat students, we saw censorship. But this is something we're not exactly shocked to see because we're so used to the police state being used against protesters in this country. It doesn't take much for someone to realize that the same vehement hatred Israel shows for Palestine is often mirrored in the way our own government sees its own people. We are here to be controlled by them. We are here to be crushed by them. This is why solidarity with Palestine is so crucial. To not understand the plight of the Palestinian struggle is to not understand the struggle for all justice. The Democratic Party chose to show us that they don't understand that struggle. One simple and ethical correct move could have given Kamala an easy win. Stop funding the genocide. Instead, she sided with Zionists, with institutional subjugation. This is the inherent contradiction of the Democrats' 2024 campaign. They cannot be the party of freedom and democracy as long as they're committing a genocide against an occupied people, especially so openly and without disregard. And that inherent contradiction cannot be written off. It needed to be addressed head on, but they refused to act on it as if it would have no serious consequences for them. And with that, I'll leave you with one last moment I felt was pretty striking. When host John Lovett and Hasan were discussing Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema's obstructions against the Democratic Party.
I don't know how much more you could have gotten out of Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. Like, Joe Manchin basically was telegraphing the whole time, like I'll walk away. And Joe Biden kept him in the tent. That got judges through, that got the Inflation Reduction Act through. Like, I do not believe, like, I think we agree on a lot. I just don't believe that there is a version of the Joe Biden presidency that could have been more successful on legislative policy. I don't see that.
You're not going to appreciate what I'm about to say then.
Hit me.
Use the IRS and also the SEC and maybe even the FTC to investigate as to why Joe Manchin's brother owns a coal mine and whether there's a conflict of interest there. Investigate why Joe Manchin's daughter is selling pharmaceutical products to the state of West Virginia when Joe Manchin is directly at odds with any sort of bill that passes that would lower the cost of pharmaceuticals.
So you want the president
yes.
to politicize these agencies
yes.
and use them to go after people?
Because you want to know why?
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Because they're doing it at the behest of not only the American people, their interests, but they're also, and this is probably going to frustrate everyone in this audience, but here's the thing that I get very frustrated about.
Wide range of listeners across a broad ideological spectrum.
Here's what really frustrates me.
What frustrates
you? The way the Democratic Party operates. They love norms. They love institutions. They love civility. Mm-hmm. They care about bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship, as though that is something that
some do, some don't.
Yeah, sure. But for the most part, the broad communication coming out of the Democratic Party is that these are the things that they care about. These are the top line issues. We got to protect democracy. We got to preserve our institutions. The problem is the other side doesn't give a shit about that. Mm-hmm. So I think I want a Democratic Party that fights for me and others who are marginalized, other people that like desperately need help. And I know that the Republican Party is never going to do that. I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, well, at least the Republicans are kind of listening to what I have to say, or communicating, channeling the anger that I feel. Like, I don't care. They're charlatans. They're significantly worse than the Democratic Party. I don't like the Democratic Party for their closeness to the Republican Party.
While Donald Trump is politicizing every government institution to take away the civil liberties of Americans, liberals can barely bring themselves to even entertain the concept of themselves politicizing those government institutions as a means to tackle the rising tide of fascism. Our country is clearly under the threat of increasing fascism. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has gone on stage and done a Nazi Sieg Heil twice for the world to see, and liberals still feel it's out of bounds of civility and decorum to politicize these institutions for the betterment of Americans. But maybe this is the Democrats' doom, to continue to lose as they play their same old game on Trump's new playing field with Trump's new rules. And as long as they do, well.
Never forget the Democratic Party's capacity to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, okay?
Okay.